All right, this is a review of all our homeworks we've done so far. The first thing I think you really need to do is be able to classify each as linear, quadratic, square root, or absolute value equations. So when you look at this first one, I don't see any squared, square root, absolute value, so this one is linear. I'm just going to put an L here. This one, there's a square root. Obviously, it's a square root. This one has an x squared, so it's quadratic. Let's find an absolute value one. Number 9 is absolute value because it has an absolute value sign. So those are our different types. Linear ones, you're just trying to get x by itself. This is an algebra 1 one. So you have two options. You can either distribute the 2, or you can notice that this whole thing is multiplying by 2, and so we can also divide both sides by 2. I'll do that because I feel like some kids don't recognize that this is an option. Dividing by 2 cancels out with multiplying by 2. So you just get x plus 3.2 equals 4.2. Subtract 3.2 on both sides, x is 1. Let's see. I'd like to do, I think, number 3. Number 3 is a quadratic, and the first step is always to try to make it equal to 0 for a quadratic. This is only for a quadratic that we make it equal to 0. Which is why you need to be able to recognize it. When there's an x squared term, we make it equal to 0. And now we can either factor or use the quadratic formula. Factoring looks easy here. So it's x plus 7 times x minus 1. 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. 7 plus negative 1 is 6. X equals negative 7, x equals 1. One of the things I see people lose points for on this is they lose their equals 0. The whole reason this works is we make it equal to 0, we see what multiplies to make 0, and so then you make each factor 0 because 0 times anything is 0. You only need to make one of them 0 to make it true, which is why there are two solutions. Number 5, I think I'll solve this square root one. A common mistake I see is that some people don't square both sides. This is a binomial. Because of this minus in between, you can't just square parts of it. You have to square the whole thing. And so we get x squared. Our rule for squaring binomials is we square the first one, we multiply these two together, which is negative 2x, and double it, negative 4x. And then we square the last one. This is now a quadratic, so we need to make it equal to 0. So we're going to subtract x, subtract 4. So x squared minus 5x. Factor out, these have a common factor of x. And so x equals 0 and x equals 5 are the two solutions. We should get there now. Remember, with square root equations, we need to check our answers. We don't need to do that with other types, but with square root equations, there could be extraneous solutions. So when we check 0, 0 plus 4 is 4, square root of 4 is 2, 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Those are not equal to each other. X equals 0 is an extraneous solution. When we check 5, 5 plus 4 is 9, square root of 9 is 3, 5 minus 2 is 3, and so 5 works. I guess I'll do one absolute value equation. Number 9, the first step in an absolute value equation is to make sure you get the absolute value by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract that 5. And we get absolute value of 2x minus 4 equals 6. And now this part is what makes it an absolute value equation different, is absolute value turns whatever's inside of it positive. That does not mean it's 2x plus 4. That is not what turning it positive means, because x could be negative and that wouldn't be right. Turning it positive means whatever the answer to this is going to become positive. And since the answer ends up needing to equal 6 eventually, that means this thing that's inside of the absolute value could be 6, because the absolute value of 6 would be 6, or it could be negative 6, because the absolute value of negative 6 would be 6. So this thing inside the absolute value could equal 6, or it could equal negative 6, because either way the absolute value will turn it positive. From there, these are just linear equations. We're going to add 4, and then end up dividing by 2. So we get x equals 5. Same thing over here, we add 4 and divide by 2. X is negative 1. So those are our solutions. All right, hopefully that was helpful.